So welcome everyone to Tuesday night, Canmore Theravada Buddhist Community Monastery. And I had requested people submit topics that they were wanting to be covered or questions that they wanted to be covered. And there were two questions in the very, very similar. So that was what I thought to start with. And the topic, the question read, Buddhism at work, please. Thank you. So Buddhism at work. I think that means not Buddhism at work inside of us. I think that means Buddhism at the workplace. That's how I'm taking it. And another topic suggestion was, what guidance does the Buddha offer about purpose, work, and feeling unfulfilled in career work? So tonight we'll be talking about Buddhism at work, trying. And I actually wanted to sort of pull out and step back and just set a context. And some of this will be quite rudimentary, but it's worth doing, that we all have a solid foundation. Like, what does that even mean, Buddhism at work? What is Buddhism? So the context is just that everybody knows. This will be repetitive for some, but just so you know, the Buddha was born as Siddhartha, as a prince, and he lived in a palace. And when he was 29, he left the palace. His father, there had been predictions about him that he was either going to be a world turning monarch or a great spiritual leader. And his father very much wanted him to become a world monarch and had cloistered him, really. And so at 29 was the first time. There's a long, beautiful story we'll cover one time of the Buddha coming in contact with aging, sickness, and death. And the fourth heavenly messenger that he saw, when he finally got to leave the palace and get out and see some of the world, the fourth heavenly messenger that he saw was a contemplative, a person that was on a spiritual path. And he was very moved. So he snuck out and left the palace at age 29. And he left a wife and a very small baby, and went on as a spiritual seeker. And this was not uncommon in India for people to renounce worldly life and just wander in the forest, be supported by lay people. And for 6 years, he practiced some extreme asceticism, barely eating, barely even breathing. And he had 5 companions with him. And then finally, Sujata is here tonight. Finally, he just, I think, got to the end of his rope and had a memory of a time when he was very young, that his mind had become extremely peaceful, and realized that's the way to go. It's this way of peace and ease and happiness. And a woman named Sujata fed him. He hadn't really eaten very much. He was down to basically a morsel a day. He was emaciated, like falling down, fainting. So Sujata gave him this milk rice, and he nourished himself and came more into balance, and then had his awakening experience sitting under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. And then he just was completely blissed out, like amazing. He was 35. And then he realized that he realized he really wanted to try and teach what he had come to see so crystal clearly. And he remembered these 5 ascetic friends who had just thought he completely lost the plot when he took this food from a woman, no less, from Sujata. So he went and found them. And so his night of awakening was the full moon night of May. And then the full moon night of July, the 8th month, he found the 5 ascetics and gave his first teaching. And that is called the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. In Pali, the Dhamma Chakkappawattana Sutta. And in that teaching, this is where I'll get there, Buddhism at work. But in that teaching, this is really the essence of Buddhism, that first teaching. And he began with the middle way. These 5 ascetics didn't really want to listen to him because he had eaten, and sort of become lax. But they could tell by his complexion and you can tell when someone has had deep meditation and had realizations. Their eyes are different, their complexion is different. And so he started with this middle way. It's not, torturing the body, and it's not living with complete sensual indulgence, but it's in the middle. And so much of the teaching is about finding this balance point in the middle of 2 extremes. And then he went on to say that I've come to see reality, and I've realized these 4 noble truths. And this is Buddhism, the 4 noble truths. The truth that life inherently has dissatisfaction, inherently has suffering. The second noble truth, that this suffering, that it's mostly created by our misguided craving, our craving that we're approaching life backwards, ignorantly. And the third noble truth, that there is a complete ending of suffering. There's complete freedom from suffering. And the fourth noble truth, that there's a way of practice that leads to the end of suffering. That's where it's going. And that's the noble eightfold path. And so in essence, and everything about the Buddha's teachings has this recursive aspect to it. So the 4 noble truths contain the eightfold noble path in them. And the eightfold noble path basically begins with the 4 noble truths. It's just the way that Buddha did it. And the Buddha makes it clear that he didn't invent these noble truths. He rediscovered them. Every Buddha before him had discovered these noble truths. These are just true. This is the way reality is. And at times when there's not a Buddha, it's obscured. But when there is a Buddha, it's made known. And then for us to walk the path and discover for ourselves. So Buddhism at work really is walking this eightfold noble path and taking that to work with you. So the eightfold noble path, there's a shorthand for it. There's a wisdom component, and there's a morality component, and then there's a meditation practice component. And it's also recursive. It starts with enough wisdom that gets you started, and then as you develop it and practice it fully, it results in complete wisdom, clear wisdom. So if we begin our spiritual practice and are walking this eightfold noble path, it should be affecting every area of our life. It should be having an effect, having an impact on our moods, on our thought patterns, on our energy level, on our priorities, on our interests, on our aspirations. So I don't mean to be trite. I will talk about Buddhism at work, but really Buddhism at work or in the workplace is no different than Buddhism, as you're going to bed, and Buddhism as you're waking up, and Buddhism as you're eating, and Buddhism as you're relating to your children. Hopefully, this practice, this path is alive and informing every part of your life. That being said, there are specific things that we can say about Buddhism at work. So this Eightfold Noble Path and having that, taking that to work with us is a beautiful question. It shows the people that ask that question that their practice is, gaining momentum and causing them to realize, oh yeah, how do I want to be showing up with my practice in my workplace? So the first and most obvious thing to talk about is this morality component of the Eightfold Noble Path. And so that part of the path, the Buddha talks about right speech, right action, actually right livelihood. So right kind of work. And I've mentioned before that the Buddha will often give a teaching in brief and then give a teaching in detail. And so he does that with the Eightfold Noble Path. He's got all these things that we want to be developing. And in brief, it's right speech, right action, right livelihood. And in detail, I have to say the right livelihood is, sorry, Buddha, it's the weakest when he fleshes out right livelihood. You'll know what I mean when I read it to you. So in detail, this is what the Buddha says about right livelihood. And what, friends, is right livelihood? Here, a noble disciple, having abandoned wrong livelihood, earns their living by right livelihood. This is called right livelihood. Thank you so much. So that's it. It's several places. I'm embarrassed. That's several places in the suttas. That particular one is in the middle length discourses, Sutta 141. He gets a little bit more specific at one point in the numerical discourses. He does talk about what wrong livelihood is. And that is very helpful. A little bit more helpful than his definition of right livelihood. So wrong livelihood, according to the Buddha, is trading in, it's all related to harm. So it's trading in weapons, it's trading in living beings, it's trading in meat, working with meat and fish, trading in drugs, not medicinal drugs, but illicit drugs, intoxicants, and fifthly, trading in poisons. So in terms of right livelihood, you just want to be thinking about the harm component. And frankly, in this day and age, we don't have any, really, I can't think of any livelihood that there's not some harm going on with it. But you want as little harm as possible to, and just sort of working backward, right action at work is, the Buddha defines right action. It's just the first 3 of the 5 precepts. It's not killing any living beings intentionally, and not taking that which is not given, and not misusing your sexual energy. So and really the third precept about our sexuality, our sexual energy, is it's really the first two precepts applied in the sexual arena, that you're not wanting to be causing harm, and you're not wanting to be taking that which is not given, taking that which is not available. That's the most specific definition, that you're not involved with someone that's involved with someone else. And, in terms of the workplace and right action, this idea of not taking that which is not given, this is something that we can get more and more clean in, just simply not taking pads and paper, not taking pens. It's something that I know I did until I stopped doing that. That kind of thing. And not, cutting corners, like exaggerate. It depends on your workplace, exaggerating hours that you work, that you didn't work, or whatever leeway. You just want to be as fastidious as possible. It makes a difference. And then right speech. This is something that the Buddha, again, is very specific. And for me, I love, I just remember there's 4 parts to right speech, and I just remember it alphabetically: F, G, H, and I. And once I did that, then I never forgot the right speech. So F is false, not false speech, and G is not gossiping, and H is not harsh speech, and I is not idle speech. So this is what you want to not be doing with your speech. And again, at work, for me, when I worked, the two that were the hardest were the not gossiping and not idle speech. And so when someone is gossiping, there's 2 different things I've done. I was in one situation where lots of times a person would begin quite negative speech about someone else that was in the workplace, and I would typically counter with something quite positive about that person that was real and true for me. And in that particular situation, the person just stopped. They realized, oh, I'm not. That's not how I felt. It was genuine. And it's more challenging if someone starts to gossip about someone that you would also like to gossip about. That's a difficult situation. And so when I've been in that situation, a lot of times, it can be useful to just try and be honest. Like, you could say, just be honest for yourself. Like, could even be like, yeah, I see what you mean, but it's actually not, I'm finding it not helpful for me to focus a lot on some of the more challenging parts of this person's behavior. Just be honest, because that's probably true. It isn't helpful, and you don't want to gossip, or you just have to think of something. A lot of times it's better to try and think of something ahead of time of how what you're going to say. Sometimes when people are being very negative, it can be like, you could just be honest, like, I'm trying right now in my life to not spend a lot of time, with thinking about things that are negative. But it's better if you think about it ahead, what you're going to say, and if you think about it ahead and it's really honest, if it's really honest, you usually can say it in a way that is just being honest. People tend to respond to honesty. They realize, oh, and you make it about yourself. Like, I'm wanting to not. You make it about yourself. So it's not, that they need to. They might not stop, and then you have to say something like, you could say something like, wow, I see this is really getting to you. Like, this is really hard for you, and then just try and talk about their feelings. Like, yeah, these are hard situations. I'll have to say it's quite hard when you're beginning to live by a set of values that are not shared. That's what gets difficult, because you can't expect other people to share your values, but you can come forward with your values and ask for them to be respected. But it's a fine line, because you don't want to seem like just like super, goody two shoes, and so it's delicate. And you can even, and that's another thing, you can just say, this is awkward for me. And you could even be honest. Like, I've recently started to meditate, and so I'm trying really hard to not do a lot of gossiping. I mean, you just being honest. But it also is tough when you've got a history in a workplace, and now you're starting to change. That also is tough. I can remember early days, my friend, like, okay, so let's go and out for dinner, and then she saw the look on my face, and she knew, because I had been changing all these things. It was, oh, come on, don't tell me you're not going to drink. It's like, no, I'm gonna try. I'm not drinking. It's hard for people when you start changing. But if they're really your friends, this particular person, actually, I'm talking to her tomorrow night, and she's actually come to visit me at a monastery. I'll even say she was the one that was the most like alarm bells when I said, oh, I'm actually going to go and be a nun. And she was great. She was my office mate. And at one point she's like, I use my lay name, if you're going to go be a nun, you need to stop swearing. And then she goes, I'll help you with that. So she started a tally every time I swore, she put this mark on the paper. It was like, after like, she really did help me stop. I've since picked it back up a little bit, but it's more controlled for sure. Like, I choose when I use those words, because sometimes they are the appropriate word. Okay, so I'm going to talk a tiny bit more about another component of the path, the meditation practice component. And that component of the path is right effort and right mindfulness and right stillness of the mind. And taking this part of your practice to work is maybe the most important, especially the right effort, the right mindfulness. The more that you can be like having some continuity of awareness, the better, and the better it will be for you at work. And this, to me, is a real challenge. This is really hard, especially if you have an intense work environment. So one suggestion, and this comes from Bhante Gunaratana, is I'm many others, but that's where I first read it. Is this idea of having some kind of a system where there are these pauses where you just stop and you recollect. You stop for a minute, stop for 30 seconds, stop for 2 minutes. Once every hour, once every hour and a half, or you can work with it, or you use your coffee break. I don't know your work setting and what's realistic, but this is very useful, and it's quite hard to do. And one of the reasons it's hard to do is when you do it, and then you just stop, close your eyes, stop being on the computer, get off the phone. Usually it's not very pleasant, because you've had so much coming at you. So the mind usually is quite jumpy and agitated. So it's a real going uphill. It's not at all like being here where there's support and it's just quiet, and there's been meditation going on here for 30 years. You're at work, and so just to know that that minute won't be like after a half hour of meditating, in a group. It'll be the whole minute might be quite hard. And if you're more realistic, but it is a little bit of a reset. Very, very useful. I remember the first really, really early days, and it was my first non-residential retreat, and it was a complete life-changing experience for me. 5 days, and so much got cleared out. Even my vision had changed, and then I came off the retreat, and the very next day I'm back at work, and it was just horrible. And I can remember being at work, and then I can remember getting in my car at the end of the day, and that was the first time I was mindful, slightly like I'd been on the retreat, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I just practiced mindlessness for 7 hours. So yeah, figuring out ways at work to bring yourself back to your breath, back to your meditation object, back in touch with your body and with your practice. Something I did at work that was very helpful for me was I can't remember where I heard this, but I just picked 3 activities that happened randomly, and I just inculcated in my psyche that will be like a wake up, like a mindfulness bell. And for me, it was opening a door, and it really worked. And you can just pick something. So it really worked. Each time I reached for a doorknob and opened a door, I would sort of wake up and not be lost in thought, but actually be with that action. And it built in this cushion and this stillness. It was really, really helpful. And the other one was flushing the toilet, and the other one was picking up the phone. This was back in the day of, you picked up a receiver. And you could just pick one even. It really made a difference. So that's sort of the kind of formal part. And then the informal part of our meditation practice is this just being more aware of what's actually happening in our mind and body. So we're all becoming more sensitive to, oh my gosh, I'm actually feeling anger. You're becoming more sensitive, or that's irritating to me, or I'm feeling impatient, or I'm feeling really patient. I'm feeling really calm. So trying to bring that to work, that you're just more open and more curious about what's actually happening for you in your own internal makeup. This is a real gift, because it's real, and then you're becoming more grounded, you're becoming more genuine, you're becoming more honest. And sometimes with that honesty, you can even become more vulnerable, if that feels safe enough at work or with certain people at work. And then the final component of the path is the wisdom component. And I'm actually wanting to speak about Buddhism, taking it to the workplace again next week, because I think this is a very rich topic and practical and important for many of us living lay lives and working jobs. And so next week, I'd like to talk about the wisdom component, because invariably at work, it's interesting, since the Industrial Revolution, our world has changed so much, and now we're in the technology revolution, changing even more and even faster. But since the Industrial Revolution, the workplace has become, in a sense, our community. This is where we spend so much of our time with our workmates, and many of us in our workplaces, these are a collection of people that we didn't choose. They're all collected together, and often there are certain people that are more challenging for us to work with than others. And so that's what I'd really like to talk about next week. The Buddha's got great advice about dealing with what we can control in that situation, which is what's going on inside of us internally, dealing with irritation, dealing with resentment. And so I don't think I've really addressed the part of the question that was about a work environment, a workplace that's not feeling very fulfilling. The one thing that I would say about that, and the Buddha, I will read a sutta the Buddha has given to lay people that's very beautiful about life and work. The one thing I will say is that as we begin our spiritual practice and it becomes more and more central for us, the issue of fulfillment at work becomes less central, because as you practice, it becomes really clear how you're doing something is actually much more important and much more vital than what you're doing. As you practice, you realize that how you're doing something is much more important than what you're doing. Sort of doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're doing it with a pure heart, and presence of mind, then it's worth doing. So I want to conclude by reading a very beautiful sutta, just to encourage you that Buddha does talk a lot about lay life and work. And this sutta is from the Numerical Discourses, and it's in the Book of Eights. So there's 8 things, and it's called Accomplishments. It's Sutta Anguttara Nikaya 8, Sutta 76. Mendicants, there are these 8 accomplishments. What 8? Accomplishment in initiative, accomplishment in protection, good friendship, balanced living, accomplishment in faith, accomplishment in virtuous behavior, accomplishment in generosity, and accomplishment in wisdom. And what is accomplishment in initiative? Here, whatever may be the means by which a clansperson earns their living, whether by farming, trade, raising cattle, archery, government service, or by some other craft, they're skillful and diligent. They possess sound judgment about it in order to carry out and arrange it properly. This is called accomplishment in initiative. And what is accomplishment in protection? Here, a clansperson sets up protection and guard over the wealth they have acquired by initiative and energy, amassed by the strength of their arms, earned by the sweat of their brow. Righteous wealth, righteously gained, thinking, how can I prevent kings and thieves from taking it, fire from burning it, floods from sweeping it off, and displeasing heirs from taking it? This is called accomplishment in protection. So you see, the Buddha is quite practical and realistic. And what is good friendship? Here, in whatever village or town a clansperson lives, they associate with householders or their children, whether young but of mature virtue or old of mature virtue, who are accomplished in faith, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. They converse with them and engage in discussions with them. Insofar as they are accomplished in faith, they emulate them with respect to their accomplishment in faith. Insofar as they are accomplished in virtuous behavior, they emulate them with respect to their accomplishment in virtuous behavior. Insofar as they are accomplished in generosity, they emulate them with respect to their accomplishment in generosity. Insofar as they are accomplished in wisdom, they emulate them with respect to their accomplishment in wisdom. This is called good friendship. And what is balanced living? Here, a clansperson knows their income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal. Aware, in this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. Just as an appraiser or his apprentice holding up a scale knows, by so much it has dipped down, by so much it has gone up. So a clansperson knows their income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal. Aware, in this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. If this clansperson has a small income but lives luxuriously, others would say of them, this clansperson eats his wealth just like an eater of figs. But if they have a large income but live sparingly, others would say of them, this clansperson may even starve themselves. But it's called balanced living when a clansperson knows his income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal. Aware, thus my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. And then the sutta goes on this is often the Buddha does this, it's sort of the mundane and the practical leading to the spiritual. And this is totally for lay people. And what is accomplishment in virtuous behavior? Here a clansperson abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what's not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. This is called accomplishment in virtuous behavior. And what is accomplishment in faith? Here, a clansperson is endowed with faith. They place faith in the enlightenment of the Buddha. Thus, the Blessed One is an Arahant, teacher of devas and humans, the enlightened one, the Blessed One. This is called accomplishment in faith. And what is accomplishment in generosity? Here, a clansperson dwells at home with a heart devoid of the stain of miserliness, freely generous, open-handed, delighting in relinquishment, one devoted to charity, delighting in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity. And what is accomplishment in wisdom? Here, a clansperson is wise. They possess the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative and leads to the complete destruction of suffering. This is called accomplishment in wisdom. These mendicants are the 8 accomplishments. So I apologize. This was very long. Not the sutta, the talk. We'll end there. There's no time for any questions. All right. We'll just end. It's Karuna. Okay.
So we're going to end with the Brahma Vihara, the beautiful emotion of compassion. And the Pali word for that is karuna. And so if you can bring to mind someone you know who has great physical or mental suffering, and while you're being aware of their particular difficulties, you'll direct these compassionate phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. And now send the phrases to yourself. May I be free of my pain and sorrow. May I find peace. Now bring to mind someone who's been very supportive of you and send the phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. Now bring to mind a neutral person, somebody you don't have feelings of love or hate towards, and send the phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. And now bring to mind somebody that you have a difficult relationship with and send the phrases to them. May you too be free of your pain and sorrow. May you too find peace. May all beings be free of pain and sorrow. May all beings find peace. Remember that all beings face great potential suffering, no matter how fortunate their immediate circumstances may be. This meditation does not eliminate suffering. What we are doing is being able to acknowledge suffering, to open to it and respond to it with a tenderness of heart, which allows us to join with all beings and realize we are never alone. May the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Teresa, Lise, Larry, Harry,
No.
May all beings be well and happy. For everyone. And Mabel, if you can just wait a moment. We have 2 people here who are from Banff. So Rich and Sue, we have a brand new